thank you for attending. You are coming to the last and final so far presentation of the Noise Bylaw Implementation Review follow-up sessions. We are going to be covering who No More Noise is, who Toronto Noise Coalition is. We're going to cover a land acknowledgement, which is really important today. You're gonna have a short private screening of a hot doc. And then we're going to talk about Toronto noise data. We're going to talk about the noise bylaw review. That will be the majority of the presentation. And then time for Q&A. And about 7 or 5 minutes to the top of the hour, I will jump in and into the conversation, try and manage it so that we get everybody's comments. And then we'll wrap up because that'll be 5 o'clock. And to me, time is the most precious resource we have. We cannot make another minute. So, but for those of you who want to hang on for a little bit and chat a little bit further, I am more than happy to do that. So with that, we will start with No More Noise Toronto. So I'm the founder of No More Noise Toronto, and we're a grassroots community of individuals and organizations who are working to create a better sounding city with a higher quality of life. And what I'm doing that's a little bit different is doing a data-centered approach. When I first started studying noise and looking at the heat maps didn't actually show what my noise level was that I was living with. My noise level actually looks like what you see behind me. All of those green spikes are noise spikes from motor vehicles that go by my place. So when I saw that, that looks very different than a nice, even decibel level over the course of the week. So I wanted to try something different. And I also created an app for people to log noise reports at any point in time on a number of different noise subjects. The Toronto Noise Coalition has got a great history, and Alan Baker is attending from the Toronto Noise Coalition today. And they were established in 2016, and their members are Toronto residents and business people working together to ensure that Toronto remains a livable city with no adverse impacts of noise on our health. The Toronto Noise Coalition was actively involved in the 2019 bylaw review, and they're bringing their expertise and knowledge to the table to help you be as informed as possible. Alan, did you want to say a couple of words at this point?
Sure, just quickly.
Sure.
We were, 2019 was when the new bylaw was introduced. So for 2 years before that, a number of residents and resident associations were invited to participate in working group with the municipal licensing standards. I represent the Greater York Road Residents Association, so we were one of them. But residents association from across the city were involved, and that's how the Toronto Noise Coalition came to pass. The introduction of the 2019 bylaw was far less than perfect. It was not what we had asked for, but we'll get into that in a little later as we go through the topics.
Great. Thanks, Alan.
Okay.
Thank you. Absolutely. So we're probably all anti-noise supporters. I think we're probably all on the same page, but sometimes there's differing opinions even within the group. So we just ask that words, tone, and conversation be respectful. One of my biggest fears is having Zoom bombers come in on these. So I always want to put that out there so that everybody behaves themselves. But I think this is going to be a pretty good group. I'll ask that you save your questions until the end of the presentation, and then we'll manage Q&A through hands up, either through the Zoom module or visually. So today is September 30th, a day of recognizing that we need to acknowledge our truth and have some reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. And I've got a bit of a different land acknowledgement, but I've incorporated the standard as well. So while I come as a settler from German parents who came over after the war, I have a deep respect for Indigenous peoples. I grew up in British Columbia, and that's a deep part of the culture there. I recognize there are many ceded and unceded territories across our nation. And I'm coming to you from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of the many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Both of the books that you see on the screen have a deep respect for the Indigenous populations. The one on the left, A History of Canada in 10 Maps. I love maps. And Adam Schultz is a modern day explorer, and he goes into the mapping and how the explorers traveled across Canada looking for the route to China, or Asia, I should say. And the explorers that worked with the Indigenous peoples actually fared a lot better than those that didn't. So there's a lesson in that. And the other book is Sounds of Life. And this is about how there's one story in here about the Indigenous peoples. They would listen for whales. So the bow whale is the native to the Arctic Circle. And they travel underwater. They travel under the ice. And so the Indigenous peoples used to put, I've got a pen, but the Indigenous peoples used to put the oar to their jaw. And that is how they would hear the whales underwater. So when they said the whale population was good, but the scientists said, no, it's not. We don't see them. They said, no, we hear them. So I always want to go back to nature, and nature has natural sounds. And if we listened, I think we would learn a lot. So I'm going to ask you now to listen to 8 minutes of a hot docs that was created. I was chosen, the No More Noise project was chosen out of 140 applications. So Hot Docs is a corporation that has been doing documentaries for the last 30 years. And they have just started doing Citizen Minutes, which is ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. So I was very lucky and thrilled to be a part of this. So this is about 8 minutes long. And it's the greatest introduction to urban noise, health impacts, and how it's an equity issue. And then when we come back, we'll start talking a little bit more about the detail of the noise bylaws. So at this point, I'm going to see if I can find my floating menu. There it is. And I'm actually going to pause recording because, there we go. Okay. So noise is an equity issue. And I actually never really thought of it that way until I met Daniela. And her words for navigating the city is that she's terrified. So that's what she leaves the house with every day. And much of the noise that we deal with is preventable and is unnecessary. People who are blind, ill, have brain injuries, recovering from surgery, young, old, suffering from PTSD can suffer from noise pollution more than others. And Tor OEMO mentions that those that are in the lowest income percentile often suffer more than others. So let's talk about data. And this is where I come from a background of, I'm not a data analyst, but I used to maintain Excel spreadsheets that executives used to make decisions from. And so I knew that you can't make good decisions from bad data. So you will see that if you went to any of the public consultations, you'll see that this was the slide that came up that the city presented. And we looked at that and you see, okay, so amplified sound and construction noise, those are stationary noise sources. But then you look at motor vehicle noise and it's like, wait a second, that seems really low. Well, the clarifying point to all of this is that they only are showing the stats and they only log complaints for noise bylaws that they can enforce. So, for example, garbage trucks are allowed 24/7. So even if a garbage truck is disturbing you at 3 in the morning, or a leaf blower, let's say at 3 in the afternoon, because those two noise sources are allowed, they do not track those complaints. For motor vehicles, that 5% represents stationary vehicles, not moving vehicles. And we probably all get woken up by moving vehicles, not stationary vehicles. So this is part of the problem. So to me, this is not an accurate representation of all the different noise sources across the city. So I created a not 311 noise report, and you can log noise reports from your phone. You can do it from your computer. And I did this so that people can log noise reports at any time anonymously and quickly and on a variety of noise sources. And this data I will be presenting to City Council. Both, it'll actually go to the media beforehand, and then also on my deputation on November 28th. I have a University of Toronto senior geography student who's going to work with me, who is working with me, and we're going to make this data into basically graphs and charts that are easily understood. It says 7,420. We just last night we passed 7,500 noise reports. So I'm very happy to see that. So let's talk about excessive vehicle noise. Last night I had a horde of motorcycles go by my place at 3:30 in the at 1:30 in the morning. And let me tell you, that woke me up, and I'm sure we all are here because we've experienced the same thing. So back to the data for motor vehicle noise. This is only stationary vehicles. And there in the public consultation, somebody asked the noise bylaw officer, Leo, who's the supervisor, she said, so stationary noise source. I've got a neighbor who, you know, revs up his Harley at 6:30 in the morning every morning. And I repeatedly complain. So you come to the house. You then go knock on the door and say, will you start up your vehicle so we can test it? And he goes, well, yeah, that's what we do. And she goes, so what if they say no? And he goes, well, we can't make. So it's like, so they have bylaws that they can't even enforce. And this is where, like, so poor Leo goes to these people's homes and says, well, will you start it up? No. What's he going to do? He walks away. So there is no enforcement of the issue. The city wanted to improve the 311 reporting process. So now they give you a box where is the noise from a moving motor vehicle? Yes. So of course, the other day I went, oh, I got to try this out. Well, guess what? You still get the same response of moving motor vehicle noise will not be investigated as they do not have the authority to move over moving vehicles or pull over moving vehicles. Data will be used to guide future policy and enforcement initiatives. Noise that I hear a kilometer down the road. I live in a condo. I see a kilometer down the highway. And last night, that's what woke me up. And you can't even report that. So the process is still flawed. So basically they can only enforce stationary vehicles only. They do not seem to have the power to make somebody to test their vehicle. And if they do any blitzes, there's no transparency of what the results are. What they presented at the public consultations. So I'm just going to walk you through this here. So this is the current bylaw. So right now, unnecessary motor vehicle noise is prohibited. What's unnecessary? There's 10 of us on the call. We might all have a slightly different definition of what's unnecessary. Time restriction for vehicle repair rebuilding. I met somebody on this call that says, guess what? In the back alley of her home, they do backyard modifications, because if the car shops won't do it, they have people that come in from out of town, pull up with the truck, and they put on modified mufflers. They start at about 10:30 at night and go till about 3 in the morning. And then there's a decibel limit for motorcycles at idle of 92 decibels. Well, I think we all know that's pretty much, they purr at idle. The option of them actually catching somebody being over 92 decibels at idle is slim to none. So they have proposed these 3 refinements, but they also said that it wasn't at that the citizens could propose additional ones to this. So there was lots of additional ones to that. So one was to clarify that the bylaw reflects only stationary vehicles. Well, great, thanks. But that doesn't help enforcement, or doesn't help me get to sleep at night or stay asleep at night at all. The other 2 are really connected. One is about putting that same kind of a 92 decibel level limit on motor vehicles. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But then realizing that they actually maybe need to look at testing them at revs. Okay, so now we're actually getting somewhere. But still, 92 decibels is extremely loud, and that number needs to be reduced. And when I finish, Alan will have some extra words to say on that, because the Toronto Noise Coalition has done a lot of work on this. So those are the 3 refinements. Nothing about enforcement or anything else like that. So it was kind of like, all right, let's add some more suggestions to this. So increase in fines and demerit points. Right now, $110 is not enough. They need to start at least at 500, and then for any repeat offenders, double it. I say double it every time, but you know, I might be a little extreme on that. And it needs to have demerit points attached to it. Ban on installing illegal mufflers in licensed car repair facilities. Last year, coming out of this last vehicle noise bylaw review, that was a recommendation from the city. Let's go and educate car repair facilities and let them know that, you know, they shouldn't be doing this and this is a condition of licensing. Well, did they do that? What's come out of that? We don't know. So we need transparency and accountability for what they're actually doing. Complaint tracking of moving vehicles. We know that needs to happen. Stationary vehicle testing. Idle doesn't work. So let's test at different RPM ranges. For example, 2000 RPMs, and include a vehicle decibel maximum. Lower the threshold for motorcycles. Reduce that to 85 decibels. Investigate noise camera automated technology. So the city needs to, automated speed cameras needed to get an exemption from the city, from the province, in order to take pictures of license plates. They need to do the same thing for noise cameras. We also need to establish a decibel level, because a noise camera cannot be triggered on unnecessary. It needs a number. So that's the other thing. How are we moving along that technology? And I've got a slide on noise cameras in a couple forward. So more enforcement blitzes. We need better enforcement strategies. How about a ride program, right? Like that's how they started to curb drinking and driving. Pull everybody over. Let's have a look at your undercarriage and see see how many mufflers you've got coming out of your engine. And then the training of police on sound level meters. Let's stop this. Let's just get rid of that and see how we can streamline that process. So one of the outcomes from last summer was that the police needed to report back on their noise blitzes that they did the previous year. And on March 2nd, they reported back. And this is what they said. Although officers can be equipped and trained to use noise measuring devices, it is suggested that these enforcement blitzes only happen if there's significant changes to the bylaw, which would allow motorcycles and possibly other motor vehicles to be tested under a variety of RPM ranges to assess the noise level emitted from the vehicle. The current conditions under the bylaw do not provide for an effective use of the officer's time and expertise. So at the beginning of the one public consultation that we had for motor vehicle noise, I asked, so have you guys talked, has the city talked with Toronto Police Services? And the answer was, not yet. We're going to do that after the public consultations. Well, to me, that's the wrong order. They should have already gone. That should have been one of the refinements, and maybe it is, but they clearly said that they had not talked with the Toronto Police Services. So if they need to work in tandem, in partnership, last time I talked with anybody that I worked in partnership, I needed to talk with them. And so we need to make sure that that dialogue happens. And so the other thing is then the Highway Traffic Act. So that is on the provincial level. And basically, they say that the motor vehicle must retain the whole emission control system that was originally installed by the manufacturer, and the system must operate as originally intended. When you see that big honking muffler sticking out of the back of the Honda Civic or whatever it might be, that is not as it was originally intended. So why can't they even just take a picture of that with the license plate and go, yeah, that's a modification? So it is a global issue. We are not the only city grappling with this. The previous review to the noise bylaw was 2002, 19 years ago. And Montreal was just overhauling a 50-year-old noise bylaw. So we're all reaching this kind of point where it's like the noise is driving many people. It's causing many health impacts. So noise cameras is something that a lot of cities are looking at. So for those of you who don't know, I should have actually put a picture of that on here, but you have a camera and then you've got an array of microphones in a variety of different configurations. And the idea is that the microphone is triggered and then the camera catches the vehicle that is the offending vehicle. The technology is still, I don't want to say it's in an infancy stage, but it's not quite mature enough. But all of these cities that you see on the screen are doing it. Sydney, Berlin, Paris is probably one of the most favorite with their Medusa cameras. All over the UK, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, California, Miami Beach. You got to know that Miami Beach has got a noise problem. New York City, they've now got 7 noise cameras, and I was just looking at my Google feeds, and there's more coming. Edmonton did a pilot a number of years ago, but the technology was still new, or newer. So I think this is an opportunity that if Toronto has the political will to become leaders in noise abatement, we can do that. And there is support for that. So we also need increased enforcement activities in Ontario. And this was just what I got out of my news feed out of the last basically few weeks, where we have in Windsor, they got 300 tickets in 4 months. Aurelia, 40 tickets and 67 warnings in August. Brantford, 51 charges in 3 days in September. In Toronto, nothing. I got woken up last night. I've got a couple places where the police could come right now and certainly get some tickets. But apparently there was a blitz recently in the Humber Bay Shores area for 4 hours, and not one single ticket was issued. So we've got some work ahead of us, but the good news is that we actually are in the right time and the right place to do that. Like it says in the hot doc, we're getting ready. So these are some other suggestions that we have. And Alan, I'll let you jump in right after here, but let's maybe bring back inspection stations. Doug Ford took them away in 2019. That was the last physical inspection of a vehicle. They're getting heavier, they're getting faster, they're getting louder. I think those are all 3 really good reasons to inspect. Citizens on Patrol. Barry was training a group of volunteers to help with noise reduction. They need to work in partnership with Toronto Police Services. And so what bylaw changes would help them? And finally, we need to have accountability and transparency about enforcement and the resulting citations across. We need to know that something's happening, or else a bunch of us are just, I might lose it. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Alan, who can sometimes be a little bit more of a voice of reason than me. But Alan, do you have any comments that you'd like to add onto this?
Yes, I do.
Great.
Sorry. Are you
So
going
I'll go back to this slide here. Would that help?
yeah, it's a good start.
Okay.
So, as I said, back in 2017, 18, when we were working with municipal licensing, prior to the 2019 bylaw, mufflers were not included in the noise bylaw, the Toronto noise bylaw. So we asked that motorcycles and automobiles be included. For some reason, and it was never explained to us, they only included motorcycles. So it's nice to see now that they are now looking to include motor vehicles. So that's a positive.
Mm-hmm.
We also asked for the maximum permitted decibel level at idle to be somewhere in the 83 to 85 decibel level. Now, just so you understand, right now it's 92. It's a lot. And as a result, a number of blitzes, muffler blitzes, have been undertaken. I've attended a number of them actually. And we municipal licensing and Toronto Police have issued very, very few tickets for excessive muffler noise, because 92 is excessive. It's huge. Yeah. And a lot of these motorcycles, the loud ones that you hear, come in at 92 at idle. And of course, when they're at 2000 RPMs, they're significantly louder. I'll get into that in a second. So we also asked the Toronto Police Services, their traffic division, they use Harley Davidsons. They use stock Harley Davidsons. We asked them to measure their decibel level, the same way that municipal licensing measures road motorcycles. they came in at 80 decibels. When they tested them at 2,000 RPMs, they came in at just around 88 decibels. Now, just so you're aware, the difference between, say, 80 and 81 decibels, which is the stock Harley, and the 92 decibels that municipal licensing standards landed on is not 13 or 14%. It's double. Okay. The noise level is double. And so we feel very strongly again that the maximum permitted decibel level at idle should be 85, should even be a little less, but we said 85. And when you test it at 2,000 RPMs, it can go up by 10%, which is equivalent to what the Toronto motorcycles, the Toronto police motorcycles are at. So that's the decibel levels. The way it works in Toronto is that municipal licensing bylaw officers cannot stop a moving vehicle. That's only the function of the Toronto Police Services. So we needed both organizations at these blitzes. Having said that, since Toronto Police are the only ones that can stop a moving vehicle, we are suggesting that the Toronto Police Services, the traffic division, have these noise meters that are easy to use. Municipal licensing uses them, and what happens is they simply hold the noise meter 50 centimeters behind the tailpipe, and they measure the level of noise. We think that Toronto Police should have those. We agree that the fines should be at least $500 for the first and $1,000 for subsequent. We also think that it should be tied into demerit points, but that is an issue with provincial, the Highway Traffic Act, and that complicates things somewhat. Noise cameras, we think there's a future for noise cameras in the city, and we encourage, and we're happy to say that City Council has approved the testing of what's the word I'm looking for?
Do a pilot project of the
somewhat of a pilot project, the testing of noise cameras. So we're waiting to find out what's happening with that.
Yeah.
Noise cameras, when are not too dissimilar to the speed cameras that were recently introduced in Toronto. We now have 75 speed cameras. We started with 25, then went to 50, and now have 75 speed cameras. They work. Not only do they work, they are extremely profitable for the city, extremely profitable. So it's the same type of similar technology, but it's the same type of positive impact that I think we would experience with the noise.
Absolutely.
We also need to have the Toronto Police Services, because since they're the only ones who can stop a moving vehicle, have the ability, well, they do have the ability to pull over a vehicle, but they need to have some trained officers on inspection of mufflers. Now, there are a number of police officers that do. They even have their own bikes, so they know what they're looking for. But it needs to be expanded, and it needs to be established with Toronto Police Services. They will say that they're short-staffed, but everybody's short-staffed about everything. So I think that is it. I think I've covered that. And
Thanks, Ellen.
We'll take questions at the appropriate time.
Yeah. Well, let's get to that. So I'm going to stop recording. I just need to find that little menu bar. There it is. And I'm going to stop recording.